My sister didn't wait for dessert. She pushed back her chair, stood under the glow of the Christmas lights, and said clear as glass, "Dad's savings are all mine." She gets nothing. No whisper, no hesitation, just a public slice meant to land deep. A few relatives even clapped. Someone laughed. I didn't cry or argue. I just turned to my father, watching his smile die in real time. "Dad, should I tell them what you told me?" His face drained. Sienna's voice snapped sharp and panicked. "Told you what? Before I tell you the rest, tell me where are you listening from, so I know I'm not alone. And when you've heard my story, tell me what would you have done in my place." My name is Nora, and for as long as I can remember, I've learned how to take up as little space as possible in my own family. I work in a creative field in Seattle, quiet, steady work that lets me build things with my hands, things that don't yell over me or talk down to me. Out here in my small apartment overlooking the gray city streets, life feels calm, predictable, mine. It wasn't always like that. Growing up in my parents' house I lived in, the glow of a Christmas tree that looked warm but never felt warm. My mom, Elaine Sharp, decisive, always certain. She was right. Liked to say, Sienna, my older sister, was born dazzling. I was the strong one, which in our house meant the child expected to need nothing. If Sienna wanted something, it appeared. If I wanted something, I learned to let it go. My dad, Thomas, wasn't cruel. Just quiet. Too quiet. His silence wrapped everything, especially when Mom's favoritism cut deeper than she realized, or maybe exactly as much as she intended. When I was about 8, I remember wandering into his study and seeing him close a small savings book so fast the pages snapped. He knelt beside me and whispered, "Your share will be safe, sweetheart. No one can take what's meant for you." At that age, I didn't understand why he needed to say it like a secret. Almost a decade later, at 17, I understood too well. I heard my parents whispering in the kitchen, my mom urging my dad, hesitating about giving everything they'd saved to Sienna because she'll need it more. My name wasn't angry on their tongues, just absent, which somehow hurt more. Even now, years later, stepping into their house for Christmas felt like stepping into a museum of old wounds. The familiar living room glowed with garlands and warm bulbs, but the air carried that tight, brittle tension I'd grown up breathing. Sienna swept through the room like she owned the holiday itself, dressed in something expensive, her voice bright as she told a cousin about her wedding plans. My mom hovered closely behind her, nodding, proudly touching her arm, turning her name into a spotlight. "Seattle must keep you busy," Mom said when she finally noticed me, her smile soft but her eyes already drifting back to Sienna. "You've always managed on your own. Some people don't need as much help." Translation: Sienna needs everything. You need nothing. My dad offered me a quick, strained nod from across the room. A few days earlier, he had called me just before dinner, voice unsteady, saying, "There's something I need to tell you before Christmas." But before I could ask what, he hung up. And tonight, he hadn't said a word about it. I felt it in my chest, a shift, a warning. Something was coming, something big. Dinner started the same way it always did in my family. Too many side conversations, too many people talking over one another, and the kind of laughter that felt just a touch too loud, like everyone was trying to prove something. I slid into my seat near the end of the table, the spot where I'd always ended up, as if the arrangement had been assigned the day I was born. Sienna sat at the center exactly where the chandelier light hit her hair just right. She loved that seat. She loved moments built around her. Tonight was no different. I watched her adjust the napkin on her lap with that effortless entitlement she'd perfected since childhood. Dad helped us lock in the venue, she told an aunt, her voice floating down the table. And he's covering the bigger expenses. It's going to be perfect. The aunt smiled at her the way people smile at a bride-to-be, soft, shallow, unquestioning. Mom, sitting beside Sienna, added, "When a child is chosen for something great, the whole family rises with her." She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't have to. I felt the shift, then the first curl of heat in my chest. Not anger, not yet, just recognition. This pattern. This choreography. I knew every step. Thomas, my dad, sat across from me pushing food around his plate. When our eyes met, He looked away quickly, like eye contact might expose him. It brought back another memory: Sienna at 15, crying because she didn't get the lead in the school musical. Dad fought, the director demanded they reconsider, and somehow Sienna walked into rehearsal the next day with the solo. I'd been standing next to him when he said, "Some kids need a little more help to shine." I had wanted to ask, "And what do I need?" But I never did. Tonight I saw that same expression on his face, the nervous twist in his mouth, the guilt he pretended wasn't there. "So Nora," Mom said, passing the bread but not actually offering it. "Still working on those creative projects in Seattle." I almost laughed. Creative projects? As if my career were a hobby I played with between real adult responsibilities. "I am," I said. "Work's been steady." Mom nodded, clearly uninterested, already turning back to Sienna. "Some people just know how to build a future. It's a gift." The words landed with a familiar sting. They were never about my future. They were always a prelude to praising Sienna's. Dad cleared his throat, suddenly a small, brittle sound. For a moment I thought he might finally bring up the phone call, the "something I need to tell you." But he only adjusted his fork and said nothing. Then I heard the faint clink of glass. Sienna lifted her flute of champagne and tapped it lightly with her ring. The entire table quieted. Even the chatter in the kitchen seemed to pause. She smiled a polished, confident smile she'd practiced for years. "I have an announcement," she said, eyes gleaming. "A big one." A cold line ran down my spine. I knew, absolutely knew, that whatever came next was going to change everything. Sienna didn't rush. She let the room hang on her smile for a beat too long, the kind of pause she used to take before opening birthday gifts she already knew were expensive. She enjoyed anticipation, the way people leaned toward her, not realizing they were being pulled like strings. "Well," she said, finally lowering her glass just enough to keep the spotlight. "Some of us were chosen for a reason." My stomach tightened. I'd heard versions of that line my entire life, but tonight it carried a sharper edge. She continued talking about her wedding, the costs, the plans, the investments Dad believes in. Every word was a reminder that Thomas, my father, had been spending more on her future than he ever acknowledged to me. I watched him shrink in his seat, shoulders curled inward, as though he knew what was coming and wished he could disappear before it arrived. Mom clasped Sienna's hand dramatically. "Sweetheart, you deserve everything coming your way. You've always been the one willing to step into something bigger." The implication was clear. I'd never been bigger, just unnecessary. A quiet hum built in my ears, not anger yet, but the beginning of something solidifying, something that had been waiting for the right moment. I took a slow breath, grounding myself. I wasn't the same girl who overheard whispers in the kitchen at 17. I wasn't fragile or unsure anymore. I was the woman who had sat across from Ms. Reeves just days ago, reviewing notarized documents, signed transfers, and the legal protections Thomas had asked to put in place protections for me. Protections he'd been too afraid to say aloud. He'd wanted to tell me. The night he called, his voice cracking. "There's something you need to know. I should have told you a long time ago." Then the line went silent. Fear, guilt. I wasn't sure, but I understood one thing. He'd been carrying a truth that terrified him, and I had secured that truth before anyone else could touch it. Back at the table, Sienna raised her glass again, as if claiming a stage. "Since we're all here," she said, "I think now is the perfect time." Relatives leaned forward. Forks paused. Even the youngest cousins stopped fidgeting. My dad's hand twitched. "Just once." "But I saw it," Nora, Mom said lightly. "Try to smile. This is a family moment." Family moment in our house that usually meant I was about to be reminded exactly where I didn't belong. Sienna's chair scraped loudly as she rose to her full height, basking in the glow of the chandelier. Her confidence was absolute, the kind that comes from a lifetime of being told the world was already hers. I felt a stillness settle inside me, a strange calm, cold and clear. I wasn't here to fight or to shout or to prove anything. I was here to end something. Sienna inhaled theatrically. "It's time," she said. And I knew the next words out of her mouth would detonate the night. Sienna didn't hesitate. She lifted her chin the way she always did when she wanted the room to worship her, and said loud enough for every relative packed around that long Christmas table to hear Dad's savings are all mine. She gets nothing. For a few seconds, no one breathed. Then the room erupted. Someone clapped first, an uncle who'd always treated Sienna like a prize ribbon. Another joined in. A cousin laughed. Glasses lifted. Holiday music hummed like background applause. It all blurred loud and echoing until their cheers sounded like they were happening underwater. I didn't move. Not because I was shocked, though I was, but because I suddenly felt something settle inside me. Something steady. Cold. Not fear. Truth. Sienna basked in it. Her smile spread wide, triumphant, like she'd finally stepped into her rightful crown. It's what Dad thinks is fair, she continued, swirling the champagne in her glass. Some of us build futures. Some of us don't need anything. Her eyes flicked to me with deliberate sweetness. A sugar-coated blade. Mom squeezed her arm proudly. This is a big step for her. We should all be happy for Sienna. Happy for Sienna, while I was told publicly that my life, my work, my place in this family amounted to nothing. Dad sat stiffly at the far end of the table, staring into his plate, as though the pattern on the porcelain might swallow him. His fork lay untouched. His hands trembled. The cheers slowly faded into murmurs, then into a tense quiet. I finally turned to him. Dad, I said softly, should I tell them what you told me? The room froze. A single ornament on the tree shifted as the heating vent clicked on. That tiny metallic sound was the only movement in the house. Thomas's face went white, drained so fast it looked like someone had pulled the light out of him. His lips parted, but nothing came out. He went pale. Someone whispered behind me, half amused, half confused. Then came Sienna's voice, high cracking under the first sign of panic. Told you what? She stepped forward, her heel catching slightly on the rug. Her confidence wavered, just a little, but enough. What did he tell you? Nora, she snapped harsher this time. You're making things up. Dad wouldn't tell you anything important. I didn't look at her. My eyes stayed on Thomas. Dad, I said again. Do you want to tell them or should I? He swallowed. His throat bobbed once, twice. Nora, I didn't mean for this to happen this way. Mom leaned toward him, eyebrows tightening. Thomas, what is she talking about? Why are you acting like I told her? He finally whispered, voice shaking, that she had her own share, that I'd set it aside years ago, before any of this. The table buzzed quiet, electrified. Sienna shook her head. What share, Dad? What is she talking about? He didn't answer. He couldn't. So I did. A few days ago, I said, keeping my voice steady, Dad called me. He wanted to tell me something before Christmas, but he couldn't get the words out. I already knew it was serious. So I met with someone. Mom's eyes narrowed. With whom, Ms. Reeves? I said. My attorney. The word attorney sliced across the table like a blade. Gasps. A dropped fork. Someone muttered, Oh, God. Sienna's jaw fell open. You got a lawyer, I did, I said. Because Dad wanted his savings and the assets he'd been putting aside for me secured legally. He wanted to make sure no one could pressure him into changing his mind. Mom snapped. He never said that. You're twisting things. Thomas, tell her you didn't. I did, he said quietly, voice cracking. Elaine? I did. I've been saving for both girls. But you kept telling me Nora didn't need it, that Sienna needed more, and I let you talk me out of it, over and over again. His hands shook on the table. But I wanted Nora to have what was meant for her. I should have said it out loud. I should have protected her sooner. Sienna's face contorted, part disbelief, part rage. This isn't happening. You're lying. Mom, tell him to stop. This isn't fair. Fair, I repeated. Is that what you're calling this? She pointed a trembling finger at me. You took everything. You went behind our backs. You tricked Dad. No, I said calmly. I followed through on what he asked me to do. Someone had to. Mom was shaking her head violently, muttering something about betrayal and manipulation, but the truth was already out there and it wasn't going back in. Thomas forced himself to look at Sienna. Sweetheart, I love you, but you've been given so much. Too much. And Nora? She's been left out of things she shouldn't have been. Silence. heavy, cold. "We talked about this," Mom insisted, voice rising. "Everything should go to Sienna. She's the one with real responsibilities. And I let you decide." That he burst out louder than I'd heard him speak in years. "I let you make me feel guilty for wanting to take care of both daughters instead of just one." Sienna blinked fast, fighting tears of anger. "So what now? What happens to me?" I held her gaze unflinching. "What happens," I said, "is exactly what was already done. The transfers were signed. The account is under my ownership. It's legal. It's final." "You can't do that," she yelled. I kept my voice quiet, steady. "It's already done." She looked around as if expecting anyone to stand up for her. No one moved. Even the distant sound of carolers outside seemed to fade. For the first time in her life, Sienna had no audience, no applause, no rescue, just consequences. Thomas wiped his eyes. "I'm sorry, Nora. I should have protected you better." I nodded once. "You did, just later than you should have." A long, unraveling silence followed, one that felt like years of imbalance finally leveling. And in that silence, something broke. Not in me, in them. The room didn't recover. Not in the way anyone wanted it to. The conversation didn't pick back up, the laughter didn't return, and whatever version of family we had been performing for years collapsed quietly under the weight of the truth. Sienna sank back into her chair, staring at her empty plate as if it might rewrite the night for her. Mom pressed her hands to her temples, whispering sharp, broken fragments. Denial, disbelief, excuses that no longer worked. The power she held over the narrative had slipped, and she knew it. Dad stood slowly. For a moment, I thought he might fall. "Nora," he said, voice rough, "I should have told you sooner. I should have stood up for you long before tonight." He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, humbled and exhausted. "I let fear make choices for me." "I'm sorry." I nodded. Not with bitterness, not with triumph, just with the understanding of someone who'd waited a long time for honesty. Around us, relatives avoided eye contact. Some looked guilty, some confused, some ashamed for cheering minutes earlier. No one tried to fix it. No one could. I pushed my chair back and stood. The room felt too warm, too crowded, too full of memories I'd carried alone. When I opened the front door, cold air rushed over me, sharp, clean, real. Snow had started to fall, dusting the walkway in soft white. Behind me, I heard Dad murmur my name, but I didn't turn around. For the first time in years, I wasn't leaving that house defeated. I wasn't running. I was walking out with what was mine, my share, my truth, and a future that didn't require their permission. I've learned something since that night. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives quietly in a signed document, a steady voice, or the simple decision to walk away with your dignity intact. I didn't win by shouting. I won by standing still while the truth finally caught up to everyone else. If you've ever faced favoritism or been pushed to the edges of your own family, tell me where you're listening from. Share your story in the comments and subscribe if you want more stories like this. You're not alone, not anymore.